This is Arroyo Mocho Creek in Livermore, California. Since December 26th, it's flooded, drained, and flooded several times again. It's crazy to me how a creek that 90% of the year is completely dry fills so quickly, sometimes in a matter of hours. And I wondered where all this water is coming from. So, this is my journey to the source of Arroyo Mocho. We begin here in Parkway Park, where I was just filming previously. We're going to follow the creek, Arroyo Mocho, all the way to Mines Road, then into the valley past Mendenhall, and eventually we're going to work our way to Mount Mocho, where it is believed that this creek begins. As we travel down Mines Road into the canyons, you can see Arroyo Mocho watershed outlined in blue. But there's a separate man-made water system outlined in green. It's a small component of the Hetch Hetchy Aqueduct. Hetch Hetchy is a water delivery system that originates in Yosemite Valley and is designed to deliver water to San Francisco. This valley was dammed in the 1920s to create a reservoir, and because of that it remains controversial to this day. Arroyo Mocho and Mines Road run in parallel. And so as you first start down Lower Mines Road, you see these beautiful valleys filled with sycamore trees, and the water here is flowing higher than normal, but it just adds to the beauty of the landscape. This area is known as a sycamore alluvial woodland. Water from surrounding hills hits the valley floor and creates water tables that raise and lower. Typically, they're high enough to feed the sycamore trees like this one. Some of these trees have been dated to over 300 years old, so they could be witness trees to the early Spanish settlers. Before heading into Mines Road Canyon, I took a detour on Del Val Road. I drove up to Lookout Point. I would say if Livermore has a lover's lane, this has got to be it. It's beautiful from up here. You can see the entire Livermore Valley. That's Mount Diablo in the background. Pictures just don't do it justice. So backtracking now on Mines Road Valley. And to help chart my path, I'm going to use a program called Relive. We're going to be heading south toward San Antonio Valley. The journey is going to be over 22 miles. The creek is going to be following us the whole way. The creek itself will be flowing to the north against the direction of travel. Initially, Mines Road raises in altitude, and the creek is several hundred feet below in that valley, and the valley walls are quite steep. This part was filmed on 3/12 right after some recent rains, and because the road is narrow, in this case narrowed down to one lane, you just got to take it easy. Everything on the right is Cedar Mountain, everything on the left is Crane Ridge. We're facing south now, and that's the valley where Arroyo Mocho runs. The founder of Livermore is William Mendenhall. The story goes that he was mining for gold and tapped into some hot springs and eventually turned those into a retreat. Off in the distance is Rancho Milagro. It's a 182-acre olive grove. They bottle and sell olive oil. The journey south on Mines Road takes a little more than an hour to get to the San Antonio Valley, another hour to get to the San Jose area. And part of the reason is you have to navigate your way around this mountain. Cedar Mountain is the third highest peak in this mountain range at 3,666 feet. And it's all privately owned. I started to come across several examples of mistletoe growing on oak trees, and unfortunately the mistletoe is parasitic. It will eventually choke off the vascular supply to that tree. At about 1,000 feet elevation, you'll start to see bull pine trees. The pine cones can get the size of footballs, and they will definitely pop tires if you run over them. These are 500 kilovolt power lines. They originate at the Altamont Pass Wind Farm. There's a substation near Tracy, California. And then they travel 35 miles southwest. And eventually they work their way down to South San Jose in a substation in an area known as Metcalf. On the left, Crane Ridge goes all the way south to Mount Wallace. And on the right is the southern slope of Cedar Mountain. And down there in the valley is Arroyo Mocho. Mines is a hazardous road. There's this steep drop off with just a barbed wire fence on one side. Rock falls are always an issue. But despite the hazards, this road is hugely popular with bicyclists. Right around mile marker 14, the creek and the road are at the same elevation again. Shortly after mile marker 14, I found this huge boulder. It wasn't behind any fences, so I scaled up to the top. The rock in this area is known as the Franciscan Complex. It's effectively the leading edge of a subduction zone that resulted from the folding and thrusting and faulting of the Cretaceous and Jurassic period. So this rock is T-Rex old. And in fact, I'm standing on the Greenville fault line right now. This is a fault line that runs from Mount Diablo through the labs and continues on down into the valley. Last earthquake was in 1980. It was a 5.8 magnitude. But this is what gives us some of this complex geography. It's not really clear to me if the valley here is splitting apart or if it's filling up from all the rock that's falling into it. Here's a closer look at that little waterfall. I think it's funny how there's only one pool, but that upper portion is filling faster, so there's a noticeable height difference there in the water level. So we're somewhere here between mile marker 15 and 16. This is roughly at the level of Rancho Los Mochos, which is a Boy Scout camp. It is 686 acres of land, 2,426 feet above sea level. My boys weren't in the Scouts, but from the activity list on the website, it looks like it's a lot of fun. This little pond area is one of the few that you can access where there isn't a fence blocking you. And as I looked in this, I know it's shallow, but I was expecting to see at least some little minnows trapped by the floodwaters. There's supposedly trout upstream, and I'm always on the lookout. At this point, we've passed Crane Ridge on the east, we've passed Manzanita Flats on the west, and we're continuing our journey south. Right around mile marker 17, we're going to come up to Callahan Gulch. California became a state in 1850, and everyone was rushing out to get gold, but instead they discovered coal. And there are dozens of mines in this area, and that's how Mines Road got its name. I spent a considerable amount of time trying to research the naming of the creeks and the valleys in this area. Most appear to be named after prominent Livermore residents of the time. The Callahans were one of the most well-known families in Livermore, but it's unclear if this valley was named after them because it's spelled differently on the map. The Callahans didn't make their fortune from mining, instead they made their fortune off the miners. They sheep herded in fields like this one. They maintain large herds in the hills of Livermore. They sold wool, lamb, and mutton, and they're quite prominent members of Livermore even today. The next stop is an unnamed valley, and it has an unnamed creek that feeds into Arroyo Mocho. This is a portion of the N3 Ranch. N3 covers over 80 square miles in 4 different counties. It's nearly double the size of San Francisco. It includes almost the entirety of Ilar Mountain, which is one of the largest peaks in the area, and it just recently sold for $72 million. The state tried to purchase the land, but instead it sold to a local businessman named William Brown. He's a philanthropist who says he hopes to preserve the land, and that's a good thing because this is untouched territory. It's incredibly beautiful and, in my opinion, really does need to be preserved. One of the northernmost segments of N3 is an area from Callahan Gulch to just short of Terraville Canyon, and it includes Smith Gulch, South Pocket, all of Mount Mocho, which we're getting to. But N3 is an active cattle ranch, and I'm assuming this is their cattle corral. Just a little further down the road is this oak tree and another creek that feeds into Arroyo Mocho, but this whole area doesn't have a name, so I'm assuming this is still N3 land. In our quest to find the source of Arroyo Mocho, we have reached a big tributary. This is Terraville Canyon. I'm actually not sure how it got its name, so if anyone knows, leave a comment. But this is a 2.5 mile stretch of water. It's Terraville Creek, and it goes all the way back to Boardman Mountain. So this bowl here is a major source for water that reaches Livermore. All of that drains straight into Arroyo Mocho. Just as you enter Terraville Canyon, you are greeted with this huge tire. This is a new arrival. Not sure how long it's going to be there. Terraville Creek and Terraville Canyon are on the east side of Mines Road, and they normally flow under the road, but when the water was high a few weeks ago, it created some damage. So this now is the western side, and they've tarped it over because we're expecting more rain. Saw this rock deep in the canyon on my way out. I thought it looked pretty cool, so I put it on film. As we're getting closer and closer to the origin of the creek, it's getting calmer and calmer. And these scenes are so tranquil. In fact, I have the audio up later on in the video so you can hear the frogs in the background. Normally the creek goes through conduits under the road, but here it's flowing over the top. I stop at the base of this rock. I'm trying to find minnows or any evidence of fish of any kind. And I come across a surprise. There's a frog. There's a hairpin turn in Mines Road right around this large rock feature. For me, this is, from this point forward, is some of the most beautiful parts of Mines Road. And if you can stop at any one of these pullouts and just kind of explore the creek and listen to the sounds in the background, I just found it absolutely delightful. At this point in the video, I turned around, looked across the road, and noticed a waterfall, a spectacular waterfall. I haven't really been filming the western slope of Mines Road Canyon. This is one of the exceptions. This waterfall was just spectacular. It's at the foot of Ilar Mountain, and it seems to originate from an area known as Bonita Springs. Behind that rock crag up there is Bonita Springs. And unfortunately, this is all private land, so I can't really explore, but I'm sure it's magnificent up there. Henry Clay Smith was a friend of William Mendenhall. He married Mary Ann Harland, who traveled the same route as the Donner Party in 1846. Mary's party rode ahead. They took that Hastings cutoff, but they were a little bit earlier. They were the last party to make it through, and the Donners did not. In 1852, Henry Smith was elected to the California legislature, where he introduced a bill to create Alameda County. Smiths are also owners of a mine in this area, so it's aptly named Smith Gulch. I'm filming here on March 12th, and based on the flooding, it's just too much for my little SUV to get through that. So the rest of the filming is from February 25th. There was a theme on this drive that whenever the creek crossed under the road, there would be this type of damage. This was quite extensive, and I suspect it was fairly recent since the only effort at repair were those cones. The next stop on our journey south is Turner Gulch, and while I can't be certain, I believe it's named after James Turner. He was a coal miner back in the 1850s. He saved his money, ended up buying a bunch of land, about 2,000 acres in the area. And I know there are areas named after him near Stockton, and I know that there's a mine in this area owned by George and Robert Turner. I just don't know if they're all related. On February 10th, this portion of Mines Road was closed because of this damage. It opened up a week later, though, and I was able to pass through. And here it is after repair. To the west is Biel Ranch. Mercury News did an expose on these guys fighting the SCO complex fire back in 2020. There's a link in the description below. Now from the Biel Ranch perspective looking west, I'm just trying to show the drainage pattern from these two canyons. So from the Turner Canyon on the left, you have that drainage pattern from in front of Mount Boardman, and Pulse Canyon on the right. That's all going to feed into Arroyo Mocho. Before we explore Pulse Canyon, I just want to look back. This is looking now north toward Livermore. Everything on the west is Earle Mountain, so that's all N3 land. And there's just not a lot of canyons there that feed into Arroyo Mocho, so I haven't been exploring that much. So we're going to return here to Pulse Canyon, and we're going to pick up with Arroyo Mocho Creek, which is now just a trickle, as we continue to work our way south. Now finally our last stop. We're going to work our way toward an area known as South Pocket, and I got out the drone for this. I tried to stay over the easement line here, but there was nowhere to pull off on the side of the road, so I could only fly so far, and my drone can only go so high. So you get a little idea of the creek here as it works its way back toward South Pocket, and ultimately we're going to elevate here and get a view of Mount Mocho, the namesake for Arroyo Mocho. At some point, I max out with the altitude of the drone. And so I'm just going to have to hand off to Google Earth here, and we'll continue to go up in elevation. There's Mount Mocho, and you'll see just how far back that really goes here as we work our way in altitude and perspective. Each one of those canyons is ultimately feeding into the creek. And while I had envisioned being able to go to the source and being able to maybe step across the point where it began, a pond or a spring or whatever the heck it was going to be, but it turns out there is no one source. It's all of this, all these canyons, on the east and on the west, all converging to feed Arroyo Mocho, one of the most beautiful creeks in Livermore Valley. I'd like to end on this note as Relive takes us back northward into Livermore Valley. I just want to remind everyone that I respected the property boundaries. I didn't cross any fence lines, and I tried my best not to film into anyone's personal space. It is a beautiful drive. It is for everyone. But you see the no trespassing signs all along the route. Respect their wishes and just enjoy the drive. Stick to designated pullouts. And I appreciate everyone joining me for this journey to find the source of Arroyo Mocho Creek. Thank you very much.